Welcome back to Learn Your Stripes. I'm Ryan Guillory.
And I'm Michael Moran, and today we're going to discuss physical preparation and fitness, and as well, the long-awaited back judge position with our very own back judge, Daniel Huckstep. Daniel, thanks for being on here today.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. Looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of listeners out there. They've heard us talk about wings and little referee, little umpire. So for all the guys that work deep, this is going to be the one for you guys. So before we get going on that, we're going to jump to our play from last week, and then we'll come back and talk about working deep. So last week we had a play 2nd and 5 for A from the B35 yard line. A1's legal forward pass is deflected by B1 at the B40, and lineman A55, who was ineligible when the ball was snapped, catches the ball at the B37 yard line and runs to the B25 where he's tackled. We want to know what the ruling is on this. And in this case, it's going to be 1st and 10 for A from the B25 yard line. There is no foul because A55 became eligible as soon as B1 touched the pass.
As Michael said, we're joined this week by Daniel Huckstep. Daniel has been the back judge on our crew. We came onto our crew together at the same time, so the entirety of my high school officiating career, Daniel has been the back judge, and due to his speed and skill, has made my life a whole heck of a lot easier. And I'm not going to speak for Michael, but I assume probably has made his life a little bit easier the last couple of years as well.
Very much so.
In addition to being a good friend and a good person in general, Daniel's also a physical therapist. So between his skill on the football field and his skill in his profession, he really bails us out a lot when all of us get to the locker room and say, hey, I have this and it hurts. What do I do? And Daniel fixes us up and we hit the field. So we appreciate all Daniel's done to us or done for us for years and years now. But we also appreciate him joining us tonight. And now I'll turn it over to Michael.
I met Daniel a couple of years ago, probably one of our IOA meetings, and then there was a 7-on-7 tournament I think we were working, and just kind of got to know each other, hanging out. I think that there was like Sunday or Monday nights or something, Daniel, and we just pretty much ended up working the field at the same time for like 4 or 5 weeks, and just got to know each other. Yeah. I think Daniel's you're just a pleasant person to be around. I couldn't have a negative thing to say about you. You're always smiling, and you just bring such a joy to our crew, and I appreciate being a part of it with you.
And we're getting sentimental on this thing. Here we go.
Well, we do appreciate your time. We appreciate you joining us. And it only took us 12 episodes to talk anything substantive whatsoever about the back judge position. So, Daniel, I'm going to get started here. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to go off of my plans a little bit and ask you, when you come out and you see 5 wide, what are you thinking?
When I see 5 wide, I'm like, okay, we got passing down here. Let's just look at the strong side. Where's his number 1 receiver at? And then I'm going to look at that tackle and make sure that he's standing straight up for a pass, and then I'm going straight to that receiver if my strength is towards that side. Which 5 wide, basically my key is going to be anyone that just runs deep. So basically, I'm just turning my head as fast as I can, and kind of looking towards that quarterback's shoulder and seeing which way he's throwing the ball. But honestly, it kind of gets me a little excited when you come out there and you see 5 wide. And it's like, okay, here we go. It's gonna be a down where I can be mainly involved in, as opposed to some of those really tight wing tees and bone type formations where it's just run and chug up the middle, and I'm just back there kind of looking for a player safety foul. So yeah, it kind of gets me excited, and then heart starts pumping a little bit, and then get locked in before the play. So I do enjoy that.
When you see those wing tees or those power formations, and we know from film generally if a team's going to run the ball all night or mix it up a little bit or be pass heavy, if we do have the either entirely run or run heavy ones, is it hard to stay engaged, or do you have to do something differently to stay in the right mindset in those types of games?
I think it depends on how the team is running the ball. If they're running the ball and they're only getting like 3 to 5 yards, I mean, I'm not maybe doing too much, except unless it's getting chippy, then I'm kind of looking for player safety fouls, or if anyone's starting to get chippy, kind of do my best to kind of control that. But like if they're running the ball and they're running some deep long runs, and occasionally might mix in like a waggle pass, they kind of get you kind of be thinking about that, especially if it's like a long second down, or like even a short second down. might throw a wrinkle in there. But it can get hard because sometimes you just feel like you're on an island and you're not doing much and helping out, except for maybe relaying to the referee if it's if the clock's going to be alive or dead, depending on after a foul or whatnot. But I think there's enough keys before the play that kind of should keep me engaged, but does it always? No, it can make it harder on those nights for sure.
So, Daniel, one of our themes kind of throughout of our first couple episodes here for different positions has been pre-snap. Can you kind of walk us and the audience through what your pre-snap routine might be?
Yeah, I think you guys had can't remember his name, but I guest on about 5 to 6 episodes, and he even talked about the pre-snap routine for the back judge and what he kind of thought it was. And it's basically what I do. I mean, looking at the play clock, I mean, that's my responsibility. And then I'm kind of seeing if it's correct, if we're going to get the ball down in time, if I need to try pumping it a little bit, see if we need to get that 40 reset to 25 and count down. And then I may differ a little bit. I'm starting counting defense. If I'm facing towards the game clock, then I'll obviously take a look and make sure that's going well. But I'm counting the defense mainly right after that, and then game clock, and I'll go back to the play clock, and along the same lines, I can kind of get a feel as I'm counting the defense, which there's going to be maybe a strength to one side as opposed to a balance formation if I need to help out one of you guys, whether it's the H or the L, to kind of get an idea there. And then I think that the whole time just kind of knowing you're down in distance, and since you, Michael, give us a good pregame, I can kind of get an idea. And as the game goes along, I like which, if it is going to be a possible pass play, who might be getting that ball. And then possibly thinking what routes they're going to run based off their formation.
I know you talked about play clock and game clock responsibility and being able to signal, the clock status after a penalty. Listening to that, it sort of highlights the difference between 5 and 7-man mechanics to me. Because I know in 7-man mechanics, that's sort of divided up between the deep three. Michael's a deep wing in college, so in 7-man mechanics, he'll probably be, along with the side judge, giving a wind or a stop clock to his referee if we're coming out of a penalty, or to know what the status of the ball is at that time. Whereas in high school, you don't have those two guys flanking you on the sides. It's just you. You've got play clock, you got game clock, you got clock status. And we're all trying to give that and remember it. But I know that the referee really has the most direct line of sight to you if he's looking forward. And it's a lot of responsibility for the back judge at the high school level, I think, to have that. Is that something that's gotten easier for you over time? Is it still a lot to deal with? Or how do you progress over the years in handling all those responsibilities?
Yeah, I'd say especially early on with my back judge role. I mean, it's like, I only want to focus on the game clock or the play clock, but I know it's my responsibility. I'm just trying to focus on not messing up out there and getting the DPIs that you're mainly going to call, or some holding calls. But I think over the last 3 to 4 years, it's gotten a lot easier. I will say, especially if the teams are up tempo and you're trying to check everything, sometimes it's really difficult if that game clock's getting started or not getting started right on time. But I think our crew does a good job. I think we all do a good job of kind of checking up there. I think it's really important if they're facing the game clock to kind of look up there. Ideally, you have play clocks on both ends of the field, and I think every field we've had this year, we've been fortunate this year, no clock timing errors. Of course, we'll probably have it this week. But we've had fortunate games where we've had clocks at both end zones for the play clock, which is helpful. But yeah, it can be really challenging. I think you just got to recognize it's going to be challenging, and then keep everything recorded, whether it's timeouts, scores, because you're going to know if some time ticks off, and then you can get that corrected if you need to be. But yeah, definitely a challenge with 5. But I do like I don't do any college ball, but I talked with some of you guys and college officials, and how it can be challenging at the high school level when you have 5 wide and the clock status and all that. But sometimes I kind of enjoy that challenge. Kind of gets me excited to go out there and do that on Friday nights and do the best I can for the kids. So
other than the 5 wide adrenaline rush, what else do you love about being a back judge? Because it's no secret here. We're like you said, we're 2 wings, and we love our sideline. Being out there in the middle, what do you kind of love about being a back judge?
I think I just like being in the middle, deep. I played safety in high school, so it's kind of just a familiar kind of a role out there. I'm kind of looking for some similar things. And one thing I really enjoy doing is like running, which has gotten me into trouble, especially at the beginning. Definitely had to learn from more experienced officials that it's not always good to be moving as the play's coming. Kind of slow your head movement, slow your body, kind of look at some of that. If there's like any DPI type stuff or any kind of holding, that you're not always going to have good vision if you're moving. I definitely enjoy helping out with like after the ball is dead and everything's kind of settled down, kind of relaying that ball in. I really do just kind of enjoy running back sideline to sideline if necessary. Obviously, if the ball travels more than 5 yards down the field, I'm kind of insist on that, and that's kind of my way to stay in the game, especially on those small or in those games where you're just going to run the ball the whole night. So I think just being present out there in the field, and having a hand in most of the plays if I can. So
yeah, I have to say that over the years, my lack of athleticism / lack of graceful running has been made up for a lot by the amount of grass that you can cover out there in the field. So I've always been very grateful for you out there. It's made my life a lot easier.
It goes both ways.
On the field. I think that we've hit our quota on the amount of back judge discussion that we can have. We'll wait another 12 to 13 episodes before discussing the position again. But we're going to move on now to discuss another topic that you have experience in. And we can always come back and hit some back judge stuff. I've just run out of the possible questions I can ask about the position at this point in time. So let's move on a little bit for the time being anyway to physical preparation and fitness. I know one thing that you've talked about in the past, and you've presented to some associations as well, is the importance of diet, nutrition, physical exercise for officials, which seems to be more and more of an emphasis every year, looking the part on the field in addition to knowing the mechanics, knowing the rules, knowing where we need to be. For those who want to become better officials, want to keep moving on, who may not have placed too much of an emphasis on diet, nutrition, or physical exercise in the past, do you have recommendations for them and where and how to start with, changing your diet, getting started an exercise routine, or resources that they might look into?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely find a lot of good resources on the internet, and a lot of crazy ones too. I guess if you're like a newer starting out, I think I have a bachelor's degree in exercise science, and the American College of Sports Medicine, their general recommendations are 5 days a week of 30 minutes to moderate aerobic exercise, and 2 days a week of strength training for big muscle groups. And that's a good way to start out. If you're like, what the heck does moderate intensity mean? Basically, you can easily go find some heart rate conversions. Basically, you're just wanting your heart rate to be within a certain range as you're doing some type of activity, ideally aerobic. So that's like your swimming, your biking, your walking, your running. And you kind of want it in that range, which I think is like the 40 to maybe the 50 to 60% of your max heart rate. And there's a lot of heart rate conversions you can do. An easy one is like 220 minus your age, and that gives you like your max heart rate roughly. Not the most accurate, but it's a rough estimate. So that's how you can kind of calculate some of that moderate intensity. Now, if you're like me and you're like an average individual here, has a very busy life, you're thinking, man, I gotta exercise 150 minutes a week of cardio, and then you're asking, it's recommended to do 2 days a week of strength training. Well, you can, if you're running, you can somehow you can get that heart rate up to like a vigorous, and that can kind of cut down. Then it's like 75 minutes of vigorous. But I think it's important to kind of know, like, those are like what's recommended, and every individual is going to have like a different plan, what suits them best, and some people may only benefit from, or may only tolerate well with just doing about 50 minutes a week or a couple of days of 30 minutes of exercise to kind of start out with, until you can kind of build some strength and some tolerance, getting up to those recommendations. And it's worth noting that those recommendations are just for like normal healthy living. If you want to lose weight, it's actually a lot more than that. It's like 300 minutes of moderate exercise. So just to kind of point that out there on that. So I kind of just shoot back to them because they're they do a lot of research. So I kind of go their guidelines for exercise and whatnot.
Daniel, what would you say in terms of not only the exercise, but the word everybody doesn't like to hear, diet, right? That's something we always talk about. But as I've kind of learned over my career here, there's not only the diet aspect, but nutrition in general. So when we're in either game day or even the week of a game, during the season, what should our nutrition look like?
Yeah, this one area is like it's a tough one for everyone. I mean, I know I grew up on a meat and potato diet, so I mean, diet is something that I hate. I hate eating well, but it's something that I've done better at those last 4 years because of a men's challenge. It's the area of weakness for me, but I think we really overeat just simple carbs. I mean, we want those quick fixed carbs. I mean, fast food is fast food, and it's easier and it's cheaper, but it doesn't really give us a good benefit. And then so we want those, and it's quicker to get that, but it doesn't always give us the fuel that we need. So if you're thinking like game week, kind of want to more about that Wednesday. Wednesday is typically the day that your food and your water, you want to be pretty ideal, because that's going to give you the energy for Friday typically. Obviously you want good stuff throughout the week too, but you're thinking Wednesday, if your game is on Friday, that you really want to be honed in and getting some good complex carbs, and that's like your whole grains, your whole wheat, and then also a lot of fruits and vegetables there. So, I mean, is it ideal? No, that you can get all that in, especially in our busy society. But ideally, if you can get some of those good foods earlier in the week, and then continue that, then you can kind of have like a little feast day on that Friday after the game, or Saturday, depending on if you have college ball or not. You can even feast on Sunday. But then, yeah, so I'd say set the tone early on during the week with your Monday and Tuesday, and then really hone in on that Wednesday for some of that good food for you.
You mentioned water in there too. What about how much water are we doing? What's a good hydration schedule look like? I
mean, ideally, you're getting around half your body weight in water, which is different for every individual. That's a lot of water.
Oh, geez.
That's a lot of restrooms break. And I work a lot of patient care, and I'm like, man, I can't go to the restroom all the time. I think 75 ounces is a good thing to kind of shoot for. You definitely want to be hitting that on that Wednesdays and the Thursdays, or like the day or two before your game. And that's just ideal. Our bodies are 60% water. Our blood can be up to 90% water. Let's say if you're not in a good hydrated state, you're not going to get adequate blood flow, and that's going to kind of mess with like physical function, because I mean your muscles need blood. They need the oxygen that the blood is delivering, and also your brain for it to properly function and think out there on the field and make quick decisions, whether it's on the field or just in life in general. So water is definitely important. Some people would even consider it like the fourth macronutrient, which is not really giving you energy, but it's very important what the role that it does. So yeah, so I'd say you shoot for that half your body weight in ounces, but I'd say at least shoot for 75 ounces on a given day. Kind of maybe start out there, and then if you can get more, great. But kind of depends on the scenario. You can count like fruits. They have some like kind of water density in them, so that's going to count some too. That's a good way to get water. Sometimes you can count some coffee and whatnot, but that's typically going through you pretty quick. So
when it comes to coffee, I know that I've heard you speak in the past, and you've talked about, as you get closer to game day, cutting out things like creamers and other stuff in the coffee. That might, it's just a sort of, I'm not going to use a technical term here, but it's sort of a worthless sugar, worthless sweet that doesn't add anything there. Is that something that you can offset with water, or is it better to just keep that out and then make sure you're getting your water intake up as you get closer to game day? Or how do you balance those types of things?
Honestly, I don't drink any sweetener. I don't put anything in my coffee. I just drink black coffee. So I don't know if I can technically speak on cutting it out as an offset. I mean, for me, coffee is something that sometimes I just have to survive on, with having 2 kids and working a very busy job and whatnot. So I'm like, if that's what you need to put in your coffee to get you through the day, sometimes, I mean, go for it. Go for the sweeteners. But I'll definitely focus on getting that water intake, that 75 ounces though. So, or half your body weight. So I don't know if have a good resource for that, but I'm always pro black coffee just to kind of get the sweeteners out. But I know that's pretty rough, and it was a hard transition for myself.
So half the body weight in water is okay. Half the body weight in coffee might be overdoing it.
You might be going to the hospital there.
So if you're about 75% of body weight in water, which is about where I am, is that too much, or am I not going to die from the water intake there?
there is something you can't overdrink, but water. But I think we're pretty good in our society, so I think we're good.
Moving on from diet and nutrition for a moment, obviously as we're getting ready both to take the field and to recover afterward, and I guess just in general as we're exercising throughout the week, stretching is something that's important for all of us. What are the different types of stretching in terms of, that we might do, let's say, 3 days before a game versus, we've got 30 minutes before a game, we're about to take the field, dynamic stretching or otherwise? What are the types that we might do? What would you recommend for Friday night once we hit the locker room or get ready to go onto the field versus it during the week leading up to a game?
I think it kind of depends on if you have certain areas that have some aches and pains. I know in rehab I give a lot more static stretching as opposed to dynamic and ballistic stretching. So if you're thinking static, you're meaning longer holds, your 30 seconds to a minute hold. If you're thinking dynamic, you're thinking moving while you're stretching, some high knees type stuff, some pulling the ankle to your butt as you're kind of stretching your leg backwards. And then ballistic is more rocking and bouncing type stretching. So if you're running throughout the week, typically dynamic is really good warm up. Get your blood flowing a little bit more, especially if you're going to do some exercise. And you're thinking more static stretching afterwards, to kind of after the muscles are already warmed up, to kind of keep them. Since they're warmed up, you can stretch them into a maybe more lengthened state, which is going to be more beneficial. So I don't know if it applies during the week, even on game day. I'd tend to focus more on dynamic beforehand, if you can, knowing that some it's frowned upon that you kind of do some dynamic stuff while you're out there on the field during pregame. I mean, you got 45 minutes out there. I know I'm trying to stretch a little bit in the locker room, but there's a good chunk of time that you're out there on the field before the game actually starts. And to me, I always feel pretty cold and pretty stiff going in those first couple of plays. So I'll try to do some dynamic stuff in the locker room beforehand, and then I think during pregame, if you can, it's frowned upon by some people that you're out there stretching. So I think kind of working some of those plays if you can, if the offense or if the teams are doing some some simulated plays, we can kind of engage in some of those in your position. That might help with the warm up as well, and also kind of getting a little jog out there as the teams run onto the field. If you're kind of walking them in, it's going to help even more with that dynamic. But then, if you're having aches and pains during the week, it might be good to shoot for a 30 second to 60 second hold, a couple sets to kind of help get those muscles lengthened. As for a rehab state, I know myself, hamstrings are always an issue for me lately. So kind of stretching those 30s to 60 seconds during the week, and especially after the game, when the muscles are warm, to kind of help prevent injury and help keep those muscle lengthened is very important. So,
are there any resources? I know you talked about resources for getting started with exercise and the like earlier. Any specific resources that you know of that somebody could go look at to either sort of see different stretches for different muscle groups? Or is it just sort of a Google search might take you to the same type of information?
Yeah, I think a Google search. There's a lot of stuff out there nowadays. Honestly, I have Instagram. I don't really post on my own stuff, but I follow a lot of PTs out there. There's some good stuff by them that kind of either whether it's strengthening type stuff or just kind of mobility or more stretches out there. I think it's really easy to find some good resources out there on the social media, especially for some experienced clinicians. One set of guys I always follow are called the prehab guys. They always give some good stretches and examples of strengthening things as well, which anyone can follow in there. So I think it's just in general, just kind of look it up. And then if you're really struggling with a certain area and you're having aches and pains, and then maybe it's time to go in to see a professional and get some assistance that way.
So Daniel, are there any items that you would recommend? I think all of us now have the percussion guns, and keep in mind we're not sponsored by any particular brands, but
if any brands do want to sponsor us, learnyourstripes@gmail.com.
Absolutely. Bring it on. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Send your mail to the learnyourstripes@gmail.com. I won't even name them because I don't want to get us in trouble, but we're always open to sponsorship. So, but back to the question, Daniel. Sorry. Would you like I said, we all have the percussion guns. I've seen the foam rollers. I've seen, elastic bands, stretching. What do you recommend in terms of that kind of gear?
Yeah, I think the Theraguns are great. I think especially beforehand, that's a good way to almost like a kind of dynamic thing to kind of get the muscles kind of loose and get some blood flow flowing to them, especially before you go out there on the field. Kind of gives you a little warm up there. I don't really have a specific brand I like. I personally don't use them. I've had a few people show me theirs, and I've kind of and then there's like a different price range, whether it's 60, and I've seen a couple like $150, $200 ones. I don't really have a preference. I think both kind of do the same thing. Maybe it's just a little bit biased towards the $150 one I've seen. But I don't think there's anything bad about those. I think they're all good to kind of help warm up. As far as rollers, I mean, some people like the really firm, thick rollers that kind of work on their like IT band areas. I kind of lean more towards the ones that give more give, maybe just because I come from a rehab standpoint and the comfort level of whether I'm working with patients using those or for stretching or for exercise. So I tend to go towards like the more softer kind. But one thing I have liked recently, which we started using in our clinic, are like these heavy resistance bands. They're basically like the pull-up assisted bands. And what I like them for is like some hip mobilization stuff. So I think a lot of people have hip pain, back pain, and usually sometimes it's the hips that are the drivers, and you can get some good, easily self-hip mobilizations, meaning that you're kind of getting a little stretch of the joint itself as you're moving through. And there's some good examples on social media or on Google of some like self-assisted hip mobilizations. So I think if you're one that's struggling with like maybe some knee pain that's coming from the hip, or the hip pain, or maybe even back pain from the hip, it might be worth checking out. Kind of work on some mobility there.
What about decompressing after the game? Is there any sort of stretching you would recommend after a game's ended, or we're going back to the percussion gun, or any kind of light exercise that would help after the game?
I think light exercise. I think that's more like the static stretching that you're wanting, those 30 to 60 second holds. As officials, we're running up and down. We're doing some like side runs, side shuffling. So anytime you can kind of stretch out the hips, whether it's the outside back butt muscles or the hip flexors in the front of your thigh, or the quads, or the hamstrings or the calves. Any of those stretches for like 30 seconds or a couple of rounds or a minute, depending on how much time you want to spend stretching afterwards. But I think 30 seconds for a couple of times would be suffice for the muscle groups that can kind of help out. Percussion gun, if you got some good tight areas, I know we've had a couple of crew members this year have some like nice balled up muscles, especially after a game. It might be good to kind of hit those with the gun if you have that as an option. Sometimes you can kind of use like a tennis ball or a lacrosse ball to kind of work on some certain areas, whether it's the hip or the calves. So definitely could be good afterwards, because those areas are already warmed up from just running and getting off the field. So ideally, maybe you can provide another stimulus to kind of calm them down and kind of improve some mobility that way.
We've talked a lot about stretching and, I guess, exercise or conditioning so far. And obviously, as you said, between your family and your job, you've got an awfully busy schedule. If you've had a week where you haven't quite had the time to do your normal stretching, your normal running that you might do you notice a difference yourself in your performance, or just in your ability to respond on the field based upon how your week has gone?
Yeah, I think recently I did like this little challenge where I had to run a couple miles every day and do some like just body weight exercises, and then I ended that about a couple weeks ago. And then the game, I took the week off of not doing hardly anything, and then the game that week that we had for high school, when I didn't do anything, I just felt fatigued out there on the field, and I was like, man, I'm hoping I just had that nice little rest period. I could come in this game feeling nice and good. But I think my body just got used to wanting to exercise and responding well to it. I'm just like, I just needed that. And then I got back to just doing a little light exercise. And last game I felt pretty good, pretty honed in. And that might also have to do something with the diet as well, which can be a big key as well. If I ate like crap that week and didn't really prepare myself and give my body what it needed, I think it definitely did play a role in me just feeling like mentally out of it and struggling a little bit more physically out there. So it's not like we need to go super hard, especially during season, but I think we can get some good exercise sessions in. be very valuable on how we feel on that Friday or Saturday for game day.
Are there any websites or books you'd recommend for folks to use who want to start any sort of stretching or exercise routine?
Not huge on the books for this. I mean, I just had my own textbooks from school that I kind of used, and like the knowledge they gave from there.
We're worn out on books, yeah. I hear
exactly. It's like strength and conditioning 101. There's a lot of good stuff out there. I mean, you just got to find the right people out there.
I always find myself inundated with, I don't have Instagram, but or YouTube. I watch a lot of that. Yeah. You see these guys, and again, I'm not watching officials. Maybe I should be, but you're watching if you find out they're fitness models or they're former pro athletes or something like that. How do you kind of filter out the noise when you're trying to start up?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, because you want to look like that guy, right? You want to be like him, but you got to build your foundation. And I think kind of maybe going back to the American Colleges of Sports Medicine, ACSM, and kind of going off those guidelines, like I need to start there, and with just like giving those low level, like 150 minutes of moderate activity, and your moderate activity is probably going to be different than someone else's based off like your heart rate and where you're at. So I think kind of understand picking up what that organization has out, and they have some good guidelines on their website that have offer some free stuff there. So I think that's probably a good resource for someone starting out initially.
I know that you deal with patient confidentiality throughout your practice, and that's certainly understandable. So you can't necessarily tell us like, hey, I treated this one official this time for A, B, or C. But generally speaking, if you may have seen officials or seen people who do physical activity such as what we would do on these games, right? Where sort of short, sudden burst, lateral running, a lot of side-to-side movements, as you said, shuffling. Are there common injuries or common muscle groups that you might see, soreness or injury in for officials or people doing something like what we do?
Yeah, I think even myself, I think the hips. Hips are one of my favorite areas to treat as a PT, but I think especially if we're doing some side shuffling, I think those joints can take a lot of stress, and if they're weak and if they're tight because they're weak and then because they're getting pain as well, that's a common area I see for most people with like just general exercise and also as an official. And obviously, you got your hamstrings out there if we're turning and running for like a big play, trying to beat the player to the goal line, or if we're trying to get down for a long pass or a long run and we're trying to turn and sprint, hamstrings can definitely be pulled. Even the calves at that point. We even had a couple crewmates on our crew this year kind of have some calf strains.
It was me.
So I think
let's just call it what it is. It was me.
Well, I've been hamstrings all year, so between us, we got it all.
The three of us, there's no HIPAA violation. It was me.
So the calves and hamstrings. But yeah, the hips are definitely. That can play a role. The hips can play a role in the back pain. So probably feel a little bit of back pain out there, especially as you're moving. But I'd say the hips are probably the number one area that I could see and have seen people complain about pain. And the hips kind of drive the knees anyway, so they kind of go working hand in hand. So
I know, again, recognizing our limitations as an audio medium, not a video podcast, if I asked you for specific stretches for the hips that might start that, it might not make a lot of sense carrying it over and describing it. But would that be something that somebody could go to the ACSM site that you'd mentioned to find specific stretches or workouts for the hips, specifically the hamstrings, those specific areas?
You'll probably find more of the guidelines on how long to stretch for. As far as those, you can just look up hamstring stretches. Mm-hmm. You can just look up hip stretches. Hip flexors, then the backside, the hips, the piriformis and whatnot. Those are muscle groups you kind of look at. There's going to be some athletes that you might find and do some crazy stretches or mobility stuff. You just kind of look and find the general ones that are going to work for most people anyway. So I'd stick with those. But you're going to find some really athletic people doing some crazy stretches, which, if you can do those, great. I'm not that flexible. Just stick with the basics. That's going to help majority of people.
If there's one thing I've learned from you with real stretches instead of just the nonsense stuff I might have done in the past before games, it's how inflexible I truly am when you show me actual real stretches and you try to start those and they look very easy and you get 2 seconds in. It's like, whew, it's a lot more intense than I would have thought.
Oh yeah.
Especially
I'm right there with you, man.
stretches.
I got some tight muscles. I'm struggling right there.
Well, we kind of alluded to it earlier, but we've kind of abused Daniel's knowledge on our crew, and he could probably own his own timeshare or own his own retirement home on an island if he charged us for what he did. Daniel, does that ever get annoying when we ask you to help us?
And you can be honest.
Yeah, be honest.
I enjoy it because I can help people. That's why I love doing my PT. I love helping, help people move better. And the best thing is I don't have to document a single thing. That's what I hate about my job. I hate having to put everything on paper. That's like sometimes I feel like this week over half my job is just putting it on paper. So that insurance companies and so I can protect myself. But I mean, honestly, helping people. I've helped a few of my wife's coworkers just at home randomly for some quick things. I'm like, man, this is why I did it. Help people, get people moving better so they can keep doing the things they love to do. And so, I mean, it's easy for you guys. I mean, you guys listen, you guys are pretty athletic and want to move, so you're willing to do that. So that even makes it even better. You guys are wanting to learn about it. So I enjoy it. So
just so our audience can put this in perspective, a couple of months ago, I fell down the stairs, feet first, thankfully. And within about 15 minutes, had some shoulder pain. I'm texting Daniel, hey, what do I do? I fell down the stairs, help me with my shoulder. And he was very kind and said, here's a couple stretches. And by golly, they work. So Daniel's helped me out from everything from shoulder to back to knee to calf pain. He's, helped me head to toe. So I'm forever in debt to that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably...
I think you guys have some guys...
No, go ahead, Daniel.
And then you guys have some listeners from Germany, right?
Supposedly.
Yeah.
No,
so if you're over there in Germany listening, I mean, you got your physiotherapist over there doing great work as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend, I don't know if it's feasible, but every crew should have a resident physical therapist or physiatrist or somebody who can do something for you there. But there's probably not 180 football officials in the state of Indiana. I think there's about 180 crews from what I understand.
Something like that, yeah.
Probably not 180 physical therapists who are football officials. So there's some limitations, but on behalf of Michael and myself, and I will volunteer for Drew and JP since they're not on right now. I know we truly do appreciate all that you do for us, pre-game, post-game, during games, when we come over and say, hey, this hurts, so what do I do?
Every Friday.
I know that you spoke of some resources that people could look at to start, exercise or stretching regimens. And I know that there's probably some simple things that anybody could get up off the couch and do to get going. Are there certain low impact activities that are safe without, we always hear check with your doctor before starting some new program. Would the age and or health condition of somebody, would that factor into whether or not they should speak with their doctor before starting one of these exercise or conditioning programs, stretching programs that we've discussed? Or are there certain low impact things that are probably okay? And I know you can't give them, for liability purposes or whatever, might not want to give too much medical advice on the podcast itself, but would it be best for people going from nothing at all and trying to get started to talk to their doctors about whatever other limitations they might have, or would that sort of vary from person to person and based on their physical health?
Yeah, I think very person to person. I think most of if you're just speaking for officials, I think most of the officials, since they're doing this sport and it's a physical activity, I mean, most of them are going to be good to just kind of start engaging in some low impact stuff. I mean, you're talking about walking, you're talking about like an upright bike, a recumbent bike, or maybe a little bit elliptical if you're getting up there. I mean, knowing that some people have some health conditions, whether cardiovascular, pulmonary related, so with the heart or the lungs, that might need to be addressed by the doctor if they want to progress. And even some stuff with like some musculoskeletal stuff if they're wanting to get into some like resistance training. So I think for the majority of people, there's probably not a need to go see their doctor, but there are cases out there where people need to have their PCP, their primary care, or any doctor kind of check out and say, hey, is this okay? am I good to do this? And if you're in question, I mean, it doesn't hurt to go see a physician just to kind of get an idea if that's appropriate for you and where you're at. So I think even some PTs out there, I mean, that's what we're supposed to do as well. So, I mean, you can come into a physical therapy place, direct access, and get evaluated as well. If you need someone else to kind of check on you, or a personal trainer too, from like a Y, it might be certified. So,
if somebody has started, some sort of stretching or conditioning program and they have pain, we've talked about, we've talked about the hips a lot, right? So they've had pain in their hips for 6 weeks and it's not getting better. Is there some sort of timeline to say, okay, this isn't getting better, maybe I need to go see a physical therapist such as Daniel or a doctor or somewhere along those lines? Or is that just something you have to feel from person to person, knowing, I guess, what your baseline is and, knowing how you're feeling and that this isn't really improving over time?
Yeah, I think I hear a lot when patients come in, they're like, well, I tried to wait it out and it just didn't work. And, I hear that a lot, and I'm like, well, I mean, I can respect that. I mean, some things do get better with time, with just movement, and they just need rest and some just home remedies of just some stretching that you may know, or some strengthening you may know, or just even some ice and heat. Yeah, I mean, you're looking at about like if your pain isn't really changing after like 3 to 4 weeks, then it may be time to go in, get checked out by one of your doctors, or get referred by your doctor to someone. I mean, and here in the state of Indiana, it's not every state, and I'm not sure what every state practice act is, but PT can see you for 6 weeks without needing a physician's referral, and that's kind of like a nice little way. Like, I know this is something musculoskeletal. I know this is like a joint or a bone or muscle that's kind of causing it. Maybe I should go there first, and then PT should be able to kind of direct if you're appropriate for PT, or if you need to be seen by a physician for some other type of for something that needs to be checked out further into. So most insurances are good with that. Your federal payers, just throw this out there in case people are kind of like, oh, I want to go to PT. Your federal payers will not cover that direct access. So they need a script from a referral or from a physician. So like your Medicare and your TRICARE, you do need to be seen by a physician before you can start receiving services from a physical therapist. So
good to know.
Going back to Back Judge, I know that one of the axioms is don't get beat to the goal line. And I know that you don't. But other than that, do you have any other advice?
I haven't seen it yet.
I've not seen it. I've watched a lot of film.
I've seen it. I've been beat a few times. I mean, it might be a step or two, but it's still getting beat. So.
But other than don't get beat to the goal line, is there any advice or any other axioms or any other words of wisdom that you'd have for the young back judges or young hopeful back judges out there?
I think the one play that can be kind of challenging and that you really want to be focused in on is like punts. So not having a quick whistle if you see a fair catch go up, and that you want to make sure he catches the ball and that he just doesn't muff it and you already blew your whistle as soon as it hits his hands. I mean, that's all, you got a little inadvertent whistle there. So one thing I do, it's kind of not really encouraged at the Indiana level, but I use a finger whistle. So I have that whistle tucked right behind my back leg, and I have a bean bag in my other hand to spot right there. So I wait a good solid second or two before I blow that whistle after he has caught the ball and maintained possession if he fair catches it. It's one thing that I think I've done well. I've done a great job with that. I haven't had any IWs with that, but it's one play I'm always like, okay, slow whistle on this one. So
I think that this is the third of our 12 episodes where we've talked about that specific concern on a fair catch on a punt to be slow in the whistle in case you have that muff there, and sort of balancing protecting the receiver versus wanting to make sure that you see everything there. So I only note that to impress upon, I guess, the listeners just how important that play is and how important it is to take your time there, because as I said, I think that's a quarter of our episodes so far where that specific type of play has come up, just because it is a big deal, but it's important. Well, Daniel, we want to thank you for joining us. We certainly appreciate your contributions tonight. We've sort of covered everything that we have. Are there any other thoughts or any other things that you'd like to hit on while you're still here?
I think just one quick one when it comes to like health and fitness. I mean, it can definitely be a thing that's very challenging to do. But I think after a couple of men's groups I've been a part of and a couple of challenges, I think whether it's officiating, but I think I go back to like being like the leader of your household. Just an example, you want to leave a strong legacy for your family, whether it's your kids or your wife or whoever it's in your life. So I think if you can, not saying go out there and just be massive bodybuilders, but I'm saying you want to take care of your health so you can be effective, not only on the field, but more importantly in the game of life. So you can be, whether a great husband, a great father, a great worker, co-worker, colleague, or just a great person in general. You want to leave that legacy and set an example. So I think that's something that I've learned over the couple of years, and I think something that's really hit me. So I'll just encourage that.
Well, thank you, Daniel. Daniel, once again, we appreciate you taking the time to be with us. We appreciate your wisdom and the knowledge that you shared with us. And we can make sure everybody knows that we do talk about the back judge position, as well as much more important things in life, as you've just hit on as well. So, Daniel, we thank you for joining us. And we'd like to thank all of our listeners for joining us once again for this episode of Learn Your Stripes. As always, though, we'll leave you with the play to consider.
Okay. There's 4:43 left to go in the second quarter. 2nd and 8 from the A39. QB A2 drops back and throws the ball downfield, landing at the B41. Line of scrimmage official informs the referee that there is no receiver in the area. The referee determines that the quarterback A2, who remained in the tackle box, was not under duress. So we're going to look at this from a high school and a college standpoint. Do you have a foul? And what is the enforcement of that foul? What's going to be the down, the distance of the snap? What's our game clock status? And what's our play clock status?
We'll discuss that play at the start of the next episode. In the meantime, if you want to let us know what your ruling would be, or if you have any questions or feel we made a mistake, please email us at learnyourstripes@gmail.com. You can find episodes or obtain an RSS link to directly download all episodes into your podcast app of choice at learnyourstripespodcast.com. Please also follow us on Facebook at Learn Your Stripes Podcast and on Twitter at LYS_podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, please rate us 5 stars and leave a review on your app of choice. We'll see you back here next week. In the meantime, keep learning your stripes.
Thank you, everyone.